To say thank you.
It's been your joke for years.
And yes, she is older than me.
But see, she has to say that for you to know, right?
So how is everybody today?
Right.
You know, I am I'm so excited because, you know, there's so much I want to talk about. There's this, you know, when I talk about this thing of unconditional love, it was interesting because, you know, last week I did the Facebook Live and I got, you know, some pretty good responses actually from it, you know, and I was just like so enthused and so pumped about, you know, this coming on the heels of or right before Martin Luther King's birthday. And I started thinking about all of this stuff that, you know, unconditional love and how I wanted to talk about it. And so I get to come in here to you guys. And this is just such a great blessing. I mean, it's such a great blessing. And to see you here and to be a part of this is just cool. So I want to talk about this thing about unconditional love and talk about it in a way that talks about the things that get in our way from experiencing it. But also I want to take it back a little bit because I think that it requires us to look at it from a historical perspective still, you know, because it's one of those things, if we just talk about it in the here and now, we won't really understand why we have such a resistance to it. And trust me, we do have a resistance, you know. It's amazing because when I sing that song, I love myself the way I am, there's nothing I need to do. I can remember a time when I wasn't feeling that for myself, you know. I can remember a time when I was really like not liking myself and I had so many judgments against me. And so all of this stuff is stuff that goes on in your head and your psyche, and you judge against yourself and you don't even really know why. It's almost like, you know, you can't love yourself because you did this, that, and the other. You know, you got a number of things you can run down the list on, the times you messed up, screwed up, you know, said the things that you didn't say, didn't do the things that you wanted to do, somebody else judged you, and then you start to accept these judgments. You know, we look at ourselves and, you know, and it's, you know, it's funny because sometimes I wanted to say this. We get these ideas in our heads and we get these judgments in our heads and we make them real. So, and then we think that they have value to us. So you can remember when we used to, and I'm going to own it too, you know how you look at other people and you judge them and you think, oh, I'm okay because I'm better than that person. Right? We think we're better than that person, and why? Because their hair is nappier than ours? I mean, that stuff don't even apply these days, right? I mean, remember how we used to judge Condoleezza Rice? I mean, really. Yeah. I mean, we judge people based on their shoes or on their cars or on their education or lack thereof. It's as though we've taken what our oppressors did to us and then we project it onto one another and we separate ourselves out from the very people who we should be loving. As a matter of fact, we not only separate ourselves from them, we separate ourselves from ourselves because we accept these judgments too. So I remember when I first started this idea that I should love myself, it was like I went to see a therapist and she was telling me, she was like, well, I want you to do these exercises. I want you to go to the mirror and I want you to say to yourself every day, I love you. And, you know, I was like thinking like, okay, piece of cake, right? I go home, I get in the mirror and I look in the mirror and I was like, yeah, not today, right? That's the first day. You're like, not today. And then the second day you get in there and you look at yourself and you think like, yeah, but my hair is looking bad today. So let me go do my hair, you know, and then you go back and you think, yeah, but ooh, you know, and after you stop criticizing yourself, then you start criticizing the things that you've done or the things that you didn't do. You start thinking, and I mean, we accept our judgments that other people put on us too, right? Ooh, my dad used to be one of those, right? Bless his heart, but he could tell you some stuff. I tell you, it made Reverend Jackson look like child's play. I mean, my dad can do some stuff to you. I would tell Pam, I said, there's a zinger, because he would get you, you know, with all of his ideas and all of his his judgments, all of his stuff that he could do to you, it would just make you feel like this tall. Bless his heart. But, and it's funny because, we accept that and we think that that's how things are supposed to be. But we don't actually see that that's the way he learned how to love. And before him, they learned how to love. And before that, they learned how to love. And it goes all the way back. So we get stuck in these judgments that we have about ourselves without recognizing that, that's not the truth of our being. When God created you, he created you good and very good. And so it becomes this thing that we have to start to change our mind. We have to say, at some point that I will not carry on these bad images and ideas of myself forward. I will accept myself and love myself just the way I am. I mean, I love that song. So I started thinking about this, and I started thinking that, this day and age, we got it easy. I know some of us don't think so. But you remember, we are on the heels of Martin Luther King's birthday. And I started reading back through his letter from the Birmingham jail and some of the other writings that he wrote. I started reading about the things that people who were in the civil rights era did, not for themselves at that moment, but for you and me. So that we could sit here, so that we could sit at a lunch counter, so that we had the freedoms to go and to do and to have education and to have the jobs that we have. We tend to forget about those things because it seems like it's in the past. But they did that and played it forward. And so where are we now? We've got a thing that's happening today right out here on Buckeye, and it's happening all around the city, and it's called Circle the City with Love, where people will get out in the streets and they'll hold hands just for the purpose of expressing love. Because they're saying that there's so much, it seems like there's so much hate in the world today. With, with our president-elect that's coming into office, they see it seems like so much. And so now they're out here and they're simply holding hands. For a half hour, they're holding hands. And half the people won't do it because they just don't have the time. They couldn't be bothered. It's too cold. When we watched on TV and we witnessed the things that people used to get hoses turned on them and dogs sicked on them and everything else just so that we can have what we have now. So it's amazing because they say that, that love is a force. Love is something that's there, but the people who express hate do it with so much more, enthusiasm. Yeah, I mean, they hate and they hate majorly. And so it becomes this thing about breaking the cycle. So I started looking at this because I was, this whole ideology amazes me. This whole idea of hate, it amazes me. And so we could, just point and say, that's the devil, or we can point and say this is this. But we see it as if it's a rampant force these days. And I will say the other day, a couple of things happened this week that just jarred me. First off, I'm trying to think of in which order it came in. First off, I was watching a live broadcast. I'm on the computer, and it pops up that a friend of mine was broadcasting live, Frank Wiley. He is in the organization that I'm part of. And he was broadcasting live. And he was doing a live broadcast of Samaria Rice's press conference. And you guys will know that she is Tamir Rice's mother. And so I tuned in just to watch and, kind of have it on in the background while I was doing this. And, the comments started to come. And I'm sitting there as I'm watching this, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm glad that the city settled with her and that she's going to get some money out of all the tragedy stuff that has happened. But then as I watch the comments, and y'all know not to read the comments, right? I mean, it's when you start to read the comments, you are just, I know for me, I am amazed at how hateful people can be. And, as I'm looking, and the first one I look at was like saying, it's your darn fault that your son, and it started naming all the things that it said that she did. And I'm thinking to myself like, oh my goodness. And then it just went on and it got worse from there, as if somehow people got permission to be hateful. So I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about, where does this callousness come from? Where does this idea come from? And I started thinking about how often, and the word caricatures popped up in my mind, how often we have people and they almost stand in as surrogates for real people, for real life events. I mean, I have been in situations where I'm walking through the mall. I don't know that y'all have ever done this, but I've walked through the mall and somebody says to me, Sandra. And I looked and it's like, oh, hey, you know. And you see people without seeing people because they just become passing scenery. They're not really real. So we get mad at folks that we have kind of like disconnected ourselves from. We get mad at them and we don't see them as people. I mean, you know, when we see police officers, we think of them as police officers. And I'm saying, no, that one's name is Luther. And I know his mom and daddy. He grew up right down the street from me. And so can I hold or harbor hate for him just because he's got a uniform on that's blue? I mean, for me, it's like we have to see people. That's how they kind of build up these ideas of hate against us, because we become not people. That becomes a black person. That's a black man, or that's a, that's somebody who's on welfare, or they label us as certain things without seeing our personhood. No, this person has a name. This person has a life. This person has people who love them. That's why you see when people are in trouble, they start saying, but I'm a mother. I'm somebody's sister. Somebody cares about me. Somebody loves me. And that's what we have to keep reiterating to ourselves, that we are totally lovable, that we are perfect just as we are. There is nothing wrong with you. Yes. And as you keep judging yourself, what you'll see is you'll put yourself in as something else without recognizing that you are totally worthy as you are. I mean, it's amazing because some people get caught up in thinking, oh, that's Cookie Lyons. And it's like, no, that's Taraji P. Henson, and she's got a life.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
How do we send so much hate and energy at people because we have, we look at their caricature and think that that's who they really are. But it's not that way. So it becomes this thing of, how do we get to the place where we see people and we love them as they are? I say it starts with ourselves, right? Because if you don't love yourself, they say you can't love another. You can only love another to the degree in which you love yourself. You can't love anybody else anymore. And if you can't forgive yourself, you can't forgive anybody else. So we got to first start working on self. How do we forgive? How do we accept ourselves? How do we get to the point where we're not like caught up in our callousness? It's amazing because as I read through Dr. King's stuff, these people were organized, right? I mean, when, he had, when you wanted to start, like putting yourself in the midst of the struggle, there were certain things that you had to do. And what he would do, he said, we would open up the churches and, we would go into a church and talk and we would ask for volunteers. And he said it was almost like the minister doing the call about, opening up the doors of the church, And he said people would come down 30, 40, 50 at a time, volunteering themselves. And he says everybody wasn't ready for nonviolence. Everybody wasn't ready to do what we needed them to do. So those people, sometimes we had them stuffing letters, sometimes we had them providing rides or fixing lunches for those that could. But he said those people who developed the ability to sit there and take whatever was going on and take it with love. Because, because it's a thing, my mama used to whoop my butt. I did. But you know what she would do? She would talk the whole time she was doing it. Yeah, and she would tell me, I'm not whooping you because, Y'all know how that go. She would do it every hit. Yeah, she would tell me, she says, I'm doing this because I love you. And then she would do it a flurry, like.